We are joined by leaders who are not only witnessing these realities firsthand, but are actively working to respond to them through community support, education, and legal action. Their work reminds us that change is possible, but it requires sustained effort and collective responsibility. Our goal this afternoon is to move beyond headlines and into a deeper understanding. What is actually happening right now? How are our communities impacted? And what does meaningful work support look like in this moment? So as we listen and learn, I want to, at the end of this meeting, share a call to action. So right now, we are going to have Benga Ogujimi, the Executive Director of the Nigerian Center, come and speak. Following that, we will have a keynote message. Following the keynote message will be our panel discussion, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and answers. Thank you so much.
Greetings again, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Benga Ogujimi, Executive Director of the Nigerian Center. Nigerian Center is a national civic institution advancing culture, social justice, and opportunity. This marks, I believe, our fourth State of the Union. Can we give it up for that? On immigration event. And the reason we thought this was important, I think the idea started about 4 years ago, just listening to the State of the Union and just that anticipation that maybe Africa might be mentioned, and we just thought about, particularly when it comes to immigration, we've seen several administrations talk about merit-based immigration, and they want people to go through the due process and come to the country the right way. There is a community that is a shining model of this idea called merit-based immigration. There is a community that cannot possibly swim the Atlantic or cross the border because they were just too far, that came here with inspection. There is a community that actually haven't done things the regular way, the right way, are contributors to the economy. But when we look at the State of the Union, rarely do we get recognized. So oftentimes it appears and this community happens to be a footnote when it comes to immigration policy, particularly the State of the Union address. And I'm talking about the Black immigrant community, particularly the African immigrant community. So we thought that every State of the Union, we would do a follow-up event to bring experts to raise awareness, particularly about Black immigration. So this year we are thrilled to have the theme called State of the Union of Black Immigration. So I want to bring up our keynote speaker. We have two keynote speakers. One will be joining us virtually over the recorded media, but we do have the honor with us of having our very first keynote speaker by the name of Mr. Akindele Akinyemi. Mr. Akindele Akinyemi is also a board member of the Nigerian Center, and I'm going to go ahead and read his bio, but before I do that, he's one person that I have utmost respect for the work that he does. And I had the honor to go to Detroit, Michigan, and to speak at their foundation's work, and my commentary to their work is this. If I can think of one organization that embodies what change actually looks like, that is not spending time to talk about the problem or interrogate the problem or exacerbate the problem, but actually showing you in action what change actually looks like. And one of the things I left that meeting thinking about is this, that this organization have an orthodox, unorthodox, unconventional perspective when it comes to inclusion. They, interestingly, out of the box, crazily, unconventionally believe that enterprise still remains the most potent equalizer in this America. That while we may not have the power to change policy, to vote, to get into the community, America still remains that country in the world that the power of capital and free enterprise is available to everyone living in these United States of America, whether you are an immigrant, whether you came here, whether you were born here, and rather than focus on what is not working, why don't you start from what you have access to? And that is my takeaway from this organization's work. And Mr. Akindele is the principal of GABA Marketplace Center, a distinguished strategic consultant with over 25 years of experience in global trade, economic development, and educational leadership. As a co-founder and former chairman of GABA, he has led public-private initiatives exceeding close to $3 million, supporting municipally funded knowledge infrastructure and a state-supported trade logistics hub in Michigan. In Inkster, he has secured $1.8 million for the Liana Inks Library and advanced over $1 million enhancement grant expanding Michigan's trade and supply chain capacity. Before he comes on, this organization put up Rep. Carol Kazim talk about Pennsylvania have one of the city's largest port, the same as Michigan. Do you know what this organization did? They realized that while Black immigrant community talk a lot about inclusion and economic opportunities, they don't have the infrastructure. And this organization put up their own money of over $1 million, and they actually built a trade hub, a warehouse that actually facilitate exports from Africa in Detroit, Michigan. I actually went there myself to see it in person. And again, they are not just focusing on what the problem is, they spend their time to role model what the solution is. Please let's welcome Mr. Akindele Akinyemi.
And greetings, everyone. All right. I just want to say, before my official remarks, I just want to say that we are at war. And it's a war that we can win with focus, of being accountable to one another, building integrity, and trusting one another. We're at war for those who do not want to see Black immigrants succeed. I reject that. And for the last 12 years, our work here at the Global African Business Association, we have proven people wrong. And so I would like to open up by stating that it's both an honor and a responsibility to stand before you today to address a subject that is not only timely, but foundational to the future of our communities, our economies, and our global African diaspora, the state of Black immigration. Black immigration is not a new phenomenon. It is deeply rooted in history, shaped by resilience, necessity, and most importantly, vision. From the forced migrations of the transatlantic era to the voluntary migrations of today's professionals, entrepreneurs, students, and families, Black mobility has always been tied to both survival and opportunity. But today, we stand at a critical inflection point. Across the United States, and indeed across the world, Black immigrants represent one of the fastest growing and most dynamic populations. Individuals from nations on the continent of Africa and even in the Caribbean are contributing significantly to the sectors ranging from healthcare and education, and logistics and technology, and most importantly, international trade. Yet, despite these contributions, the narrative surrounding Black immigrants remain incomplete. Too often, policy conversations fail to distinguish between the diverse experiences within the Black community. The journey of a first-generation immigrant from West Africa differs in critical ways from that of an African American whose lineage traces back centuries in this country. And yet, both are too frequently grouped into a single narrative, one that overlooks opportunity and strategic potential. This lack of distinction has real consequences. It impacts how resources are allocated. It shapes how policies are written, and it determines who is included or excluded from economic opportunity. We must ask ourselves, are we building systems that recognize the full spectrum of Black identity? Are we creating pathways for economic mobility that leverage global Black talent? And are we positioning Black immigrants not just as participants, but as architects of economic systems? Because the truth of the matter is this: Black immigrants are not merely arriving, they are building. They are launching small businesses in cities like mine in Detroit, revitalizing neighborhoods, contributing to workforce development, and strengthening international trade corridors between the United States and regions across Africa and even the Caribbean. They are doctors, engineers, logistics coordinators, educators, and so forth, entrepreneurs. They are cultural ambassadors and economic drivers. They are bridges between continents, and yet barriers remain. Barriers in access to capital, barriers in credential recognition, barriers in immigration policy that often prioritizes restriction over opportunity. We cannot talk about the state of Black immigration without addressing these systemic challenges. But equally, we must move beyond a deficit-based narrative. This is just not about a conversation about struggle. This is a conversation about strategy. What would it look like to fully integrate Black immigrants into national economic development plans? What will it look like to build intentional trade pipelines between cities like Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Detroit, Los Angeles, connected to Lagos, Accra, or even Johannesburg? What would it look like to position Black immigrants at the center of the fourth industrial revolution, particularly in sectors like critical minerals, logistics, agriculture, and technology? These are not abstract questions. They are actionable opportunities, and they require collaboration across government, the private sector, academia, and community-based organizations. They require institutions like NAPAC, like the Nigerian Center, like the Global African Business Association, and many others to serve not just as conveners, but as implementers of real economic ecosystems. Because ultimately, the state of Black immigration is not just about who is coming, it's about what we are building together. It's about whether we will continue to operate in silos or whether we will embrace a model of global Black connectivity that is intentional, strategic, and economically transformative. Today, I challenge each of us in this room to rethink immigration not as a burden, but as an asset, to see Black immigrants not as statistics, but stakeholders, and to commit ourselves to building systems that reflect the full power of diversity and the potential of the global Black community. If we get this right, we are not just shaping immigration policy, we are shaping the future of global Black economics. Thank you.
Again, can we appreciate Mr. Akindele? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Our next keynote speaker is Miss Gerlin Joseph. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Asian Bridge Alliance. Let me tell you about this sister. This sister, she is bad. She is a woman of power. She is a woman of vision. And she every day reminds me the opportunity we all have, particularly as immigrants, to live in the United States. Not just the opportunity for survival of opportunity, but opportunity in terms of to reimagine systems, a sense of agency, and to actually do something about it. This was a woman for multiple times when administrations over administrations have issued policies about the community of the Caribbean, of Asian in immigration, and she would stand and challenge those policies. And as I speak to you, they actually have a case all the way to the Supreme Court. She is not an elected official. She was not born in this country. This woman thinks that she has the opportunity to advance system for Black immigrants. So now we're going to hear from Ms. Gerlin Joseph.
Good morning, brothers, sisters, siblings, community members, and special guests. My name is Gerlin Joseph. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance. I am humbled and proud to address you this morning in collaboration, in partnership with our sister organization, the Nigerian Center. We take our hats off to the Nigerian Center for the work they continue to lead in the DMV area and around the country with and on behalf of Black immigrants from the continent of Africa and the Caribbean. Their work speaks for themselves in the effort, in the spirit of Ampil Meshai Palu, of the coming together to support the community, to push for systematic change for all immigrants, but specifically for those of us who are of Black African descent. Today, as you go through this amazing convening where they will address, they will disrupt the system that has been put in place, we say thank you to each and every one of you for joining this effort and collaborating with the Nigerian Center to push us a little bit more as we continue to do the work. Again, as we say in Haitian Creole, un pile meshai palu, and I am here as a testament of the coming together of our communities to speak to Congress, to speak to the community, and find a path forward. I want to say thank you so much, and I want to say happy convening as we push through the state of Black immigrants in the leadership of the Nigerian Center. Thank you so much, and happy convening.
At this moment, I'm going to turn it back to Ms. Nkechi.
Thank you so much, Benga and Akindele and Ms. Gerlin for your keynote address. And I just wanted to highlight the reason why we host, as Benga mentioned, this State of the Union on Immigration is to discuss the current state of Black immigrants here in the United States. And today we will be having a panel discussion, a brief panel discussion with experts and leaders of organizations and people that are doing the groundwork, speaking with our community, advocating for our community. And the goal of this convening is for everyone to learn about what exactly is going on, how we are addressing and educating and even combating, right, discrimination against Black immigrants. So I'm going to call up Benga Ogunjimi, Executive Director of the Nigerian Center, to be a part of our panel. You can come up, sir. We have the Federal Policy Manager of African Communities Together, Niels Kunani. You can come up, sir. Thank you. And then we have Madeline Charles. She's a legal extern from Haitian Bridge Alliance. And following this briefing, there was before I get to the call to action, I won't go deep into the call to action, but there was a letter written and led, I believe, by UndocuBlack and Nigerian Center, African Communities Together, as well as Haitian Bridge Alliance, were a part of the organizations that signed in support. And the ask was to have the Congressional Black Caucus members to just support and defend Black immigrants. And so we are having this convening, and that is going to be the call to action. There's a document you should have received on your way in. If you do not have that document on your way out, it basically gives you an update on what's going on within the Black immigrant space, as well as who to reach out to and give them a call. It has a script and everything about reaching out to them to support and defend Black immigrants. Thank you all so much to our panelists. And I'm going to get us started. I'm going to ask one question and each panelist can answer. Can you just tell us the origin story of your organization, starting with the Nigerian Center? Thank you.
Yes, the origin story of the Nigerian Center is a pivotal defining moment I had at the Atlanta International Airport. I'd come to the United States as an exchange visitor. I went back to Nigeria, and I'd started a social enterprise. And I'll go back and forth from the United States to Nigeria, and on this fateful day, I was coming back into the country, and I had an encounter with the CBC officer, and I told them that I was coming back to the country to continue the business that started. We have a saying back home in Nigeria, there is the let my people go response, that you tell immigration, you tell them that you want to come see your cousin, you have a conference, and you get your business done, and you go back. But that day I just decided to tell them why I was here. And the gentleman said, I'm not going to authorize your entry to the United States. I will be deported. My departure will be expedited. And because I've been in America for a couple of years, I asked, is it okay for me to speak to a supervisor? And they say, yes, you can. So I was escorted to the holding room, and they asked me a ton of questions. Again, I told them my story. They did some research. And the immigration officer called me back on the telephones, the speakerphones. And it was the very first time I hear an American accent pronounce my Nigerian name, first and last name, phonetically, with a GB sound and everything. So I knew it was a decision moment. And they said, you know, your story actually checks out, but we want you to become a permanent resident. We think that your qualification is enough for you to self-sponsor yourself for an Einstein visa. We call it an EB1 visa. And I self-petitioned for that. But going back into the country, I asked myself, where could I have turned to? That was a miracle. I could have been deported, banned from coming to this country permanently. And I thought I could not see a lot of, there was no Nigerian Center, so that was my opportunity to help start one. And that is the origin story of the Nigerian Center. So we are literally the people that we are serving. We are here with right intentions, with resources, with potential, but don't understand the system. And Nigerian Center is created to help meet that void. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Niels, please.
That was impressive. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Niels. I'm the policy manager for African Communities Together. I want to thank the Nigerian Center for inviting us. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. So African Communities Together is an organization of African immigrants. We were founded in 2013. And really the idea around our founding is that we want to empower African immigrants and empower them on 3 dimensions. The first one is to integrate socially. The second one is to engage civically. And then the third one is to advance economically. So those are like our 3 pillars. And so we are based in New York, but we have chapters here in the DMV. So,
Thank you.
Testing? All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Medalina Charles. I am a legal extern with Haitian Bridge Alliance. And I also want to say thank you for having me here and putting me in such a powerful place. So the origin story for Haitian Bridge Alliance, very much like the stories we've heard before, it is a grassroots organization for the people, by the people. Back in about 2016, Gerline, who you heard from earlier, along with a few other of her colleagues, in response to the metering policy. If you're not aware of the metering policy, that is around the time where a lot of Haitians were coming across the U.S.-Mexico border, and there was just a lot of pushback. The asylum numbers were high, and they just decided, what we're gonna do is push back, for lack of better words. So Gerline and her cohort, in response to this, as opposed to staying silent, She gathered a few of her friends, they crossed the border and started providing the resources, humanitarian resources, supplies for children, supplies for parents, legal resources, translation, access to medical care, you name it. And so that is now what exists as an organization that has those very exact same layers in a community center out in San Diego, essentially giving back to the community. And to this day, if you look at our staff members, majority, not everyone, of course, is directly impacted by the cause that we serve. We're either asylees, refugees, immigrants, migrants, you name it, but it's a cause that is near and dear to, the hearts of everyone at HBA.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We're so glad to have you all joining us today. And so now the next question that I want to get to is, what would you describe the current state of Black immigrants in the United States? What is the current state of Black immigrants in the United States?
I guess I could start. It's a contradiction. The reason why it's a contradiction, I think, a lot of us are probably going to repeat similar things because it's a reality for all Black and Caribbean migrants and immigrants. It's a contradiction because we are the backbone of this society, right? We're the ones that are, not just us, of course, but we are in school. We are a part of the workforce. We do bring capital to this very country. We are a part of it in a historical sense, however you choose to look at it. Yet, there's just certain protections that are not afforded or awarded to us. There is intentional racial discrimination. There is intentional bias that we experience as Black, brown, African, Caribbean immigrants that we don't see with our fellow white counterparts when they're trying to, get their TPS status or their asylee status or immigration status. So, I go back to say it's a contradiction. We are not just fighting the immigration laws, but we're fighting the immigration laws while being Black in America.
Thank you so much for that response, Niels.
And I agree with that. It's a double jeopardy situation for African immigrants because we are Black and then we are African. But number two is also uncertainty and fear. Now, with uncertainty and fear, people are not able to live up to their full potential. So you have people that have tremendous potential, but they're even fearing pursuing certain opportunities that they should pursue. Back a few years ago, if you apply for asylum or apply for a green card and you have your work permit, that gives you some peace of mind. You are able to get a job, pursue an education. However, right now, people are afraid. Having a pending application, does not give you the peace of mind that people used to have. So I would say it's actually a very dense question, the state of immigration for African immigrants. But I would say that uncertainty and fear are really driving down the potential of African immigrants. And that is very dangerous because we're not able to contribute to our communities, because the only way our communities could grow, our communities could be powerful, is through our contributions. And if our members are not able to contribute because of fear, because of uncertainty, they're not able to pursue opportunities, then that will weaken our communities. So that's very concerning.
I would say we're in a state of crisis. Within the Black immigrant community, crisis at multiple levels. There are psychological attacks, and I think that despair is, for me, even the most important. That, folks are just in a constant state of despair and fear that even what used to be traditional protections, we have cases where enforcement officers are actually ripping up people's documents right in front of their eyes, being arrested in courtrooms while trying to go through the due process, being detained at check-ins with ICE at the immigration. So every legal standard that people are trying to follow comes at a consequence when they're trying to do so. So that is a crisis moment. We are also seeing a situation whereby immigration was meant to be a civil type of law, but it's been conflated to being criminalized, and people are being disappeared, that family members do not even know where folks are. And then that is a crisis moment. That said, I'm first and foremost a social entrepreneur before I became an immigration advocate. I believe a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And please pardon my naivety and excessive optimism. I'm just wired that way. I think we are in a state that we can actually, and I just gave a commentary that with these levels of crisis, one would have thought the Action Network, NAACP, the Congressional Foundation, and caucuses, you would have thought the Black civil rights community would rise up to this occasion. You would think there will be press conferences, there will be letters, there will be advocacy on behalf of the Black community. And I understand every community is catching some form of pain right now, but this is a moment we cannot afford to go to waste. Because the upside is this: whether you may disagree with what their voting patterns in the past, what has been conjured up that they think about you, stereotypes that dominate the headlines, this is an opportunity to actually rewrite that narrative. Imagine that imagery right on this panel. If we have our African-American brothers and sisters in the civil rights, in the legal right justice, amplifying our voices, how powerful that would be. And I think that is the moment we have right now. Regardless of the differences we have in the past, this is a moment of opportunity. And that would be my assessment of the state of Black immigration.
Thank you so much for that response, Benga. And that is the purpose and the call to action that, following what Benga just said, the call to action is for us to, I guess, start to reforge that relationship between the Black American or advocate community and the African community, Caribbean community. And that's why the call to action is to reach out to, we start that by reaching out to our congressional members, asking them to support and defend Black immigrants. And so my next question is gonna delve deeper into how each organization is responding and supporting their community in spite and despite what's going on around us. So how has your organization adapted its support services in response to recent immigration policy changes or enforcement trends?
I can continue. We had two responses at the Nigerian Center at the beginning of the year. The first response was we started to do pop-up immigration clinic and actually take our Know Your Rights and make them more local. So we actually make them more inverse, whereby we are going directly to the communities themselves. So we are hosting Know Your Rights in churches, in mosques. We are partnering. We went from, our last year theme was local action. We actually started to do more local action because we realized that, federal government, the Congress, is like you're trying to turn a ship. It takes a lot to be able to turn a ship upside down from a policy-wise. But at the local level, you may actually get a whole lot more traction. Yeah. So our council members, we started to do pop-up clinics with them, and we tell them to let us know what is the comfort level for their community, if it is virtual, if it's pop-up, and that got a lot of action. The second thing we went big on was narrative response. And I think the battle, ultimately, it's a war on narrative. It's a war on storytelling. Our community, the immigrant community, lost. And we have to face the ugly truth. There was a narrative contest, and we thought the majority of the country share a specific narrative that we believe, that we thought majority of countries saw us as our neighbors. We thought they saw us as a fabric, and we shared the same ideals. The result in the polls proved otherwise. We thought that was a narrative battle, and Asian Bridge Alliance know a lot about that, with, all that you heard during the elections about the assaults on that community. So we started a campaign called Washington's Prosperity. And Washington's prosperity for us is this: let's zoom out from immigration, because we think that narrative is not going at that particular political climate. So we thought, okay, what are the shared values that we have with our neighbors? We all have shared values of prosperity. And we brought our community successful entrepreneurs who are employers of labor, who are contributing, because the fear for us was this: when everyday Americans started to believe the lie that immigrants are actually stealing their jobs and their opportunity, that is problematic.
Yeah.
When they're not seeing them as actually co-creators to the ecosystem of prosperity. And that was what we went big on. So those are the two responses that we had.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And also at African Communities Together, we have increased or ramp up our Know Your Rights trainings, understanding that people are at risk, and the very tool that can allow them to mitigate or minimize the risk is, knowing the right and asserting the rights. Number two is litigation. Now, we are very lucky that we are in a country with 3 branches of the government with checks and balances. Currently, African Communities Together is leading 3 lawsuits. On TPS, on the TPS program. As you might know, this administration has canceled TPS, and for background information, TPS, Temporary Protected Status, is a program that Congress created in the 1990s, in a bipartisan way, and the program gives protection from deportation, work authorization to immigrants who are not able to go back to their home country due to dangerous conditions, including armed conflict and natural disasters and other crises. So it's a program that all of the organizations represented here that we have, pushed for, advocated for. Unfortunately, this administration, as you might know, has terminated the programs for almost all outstanding countries designations. So starting last year, they terminated TPS for Cameroon, TPS for Haiti, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and recently Somalia. So we have sued the administration over those decisions. We believe the decisions are not in alignment with the law, and so we are pursuing those efforts. And as I speak now, there's actually a hearing on our TPS for Ethiopia lawsuit, and I believe Garlene is there in Boston. And with those lawsuits, what we've been able to get is a pause on the government decision. Very thankful for our legal team. We were able to win what's called a temporary stay. So basically, the judge pausing the government decision while litigation is in process. So that allows people to continue to enjoy the benefit of TPS protection and work authorization while lawsuit is in process. And our community members are very thankful, and that is something that we will continue to do. Well, now people ask, what's the likelihood, the chance of success? Well, in the past, we have won lawsuits. In the first Trump administration, we filed a lawsuit challenging the TPS termination for Sudan, and we won. So we have a precedent, and if it worked in the past, we believe it should work now. So we are very thankful for those efforts. But also, as Mbenga said, crisis creates an opportunity, and then I'll end with this story. In my neighborhood, it's predominantly white, and when I moved, I was talking to my neighbors, and they asked, "What do you do?" I do immigration policy, and at that time it didn't make sense to them. So I was explaining, TPS program, asylum, green card, didn't make sense to them. 3 days ago, I went to my neighbors because we're doing a deck renovation, so we had to get our neighbors to sign paperwork allowing us to do that. And then now they came to me and was like, hey man, like what, like the immigration situation is crazy. Are you okay? Like, are, people from your community, your family okay? So I see that as an opportunity. So back then, 2 or 3 years ago, when we were talking about immigration, we were misunderstood, or not even, it was taken for granted, or not taken into consideration. But now, with what's happening, we are able to control the narrative, as Menga said, because people are interested. People want to know. People see the chaos on TV, and then so people will turn to us, neighbors. What is your version of this story? And then I think this is an opportunity for us. So we have to tell our story as African immigrant. So talk about immigration. I mean, back then, people, there is this whole narrative, legal immigration, illegal immigration, and the notion that, a lot of the efforts were going into the illegal immigration, and, I'm not gonna get into that, but we have now the opportunity to show that, well, now, what seemed to be as an attack on illegal immigration now is on legal immigration. And, we'll get into the details, but now we have that opportunity to tell our story because people are interested. People want to know what's happening. What is the version of our story? So please, let's seize this opportunity and talk about immigration. I know it can be tricky, dangerous now to talk about anything involving, current policies, but this is an opportunity to tell our story. Thank you.
Thank you for those wins. Thank you.
Similarly, I think one of the strongest things across the board is the narrative building, the storytelling, and just humanizing. Like as a student, one of the things is don't call people clients, call them by their name and what they are. These are not just immigrants. These are mothers, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, right? So we get those stories out. And kind of touching on entering the realm of illegality, when we get into spaces, and I say we as HBA, when we get into spaces where we are before Congress or we are before an international human rights forum, the conversation then becomes, there are people with legal status, and they're being targeted. Why? Because they're Black. So then you have a lot of truck drivers that are TPS holders. They have their green card status, yet they're being detained in inhumane conditions without any legal opportunities afforded to them. So that's one of the big things that we focus on, and the stories are vast. I don't want to delve into it too much because I know we all probably have a close person to us that we know a story that hits home, but in particular, two HBA cases that I believe one actually made it to the news is you have a pregnant woman who was detained. They took her all over, moved her from detention center to detention center, and when she was finally released, they did not inform her family. They left her at a bus stop, and she was found dead 2 to 3 days later. That's someone's mom, that's someone's wife, someone's sister. But the system didn't afford them the rights that they deserved. In another similar situation, another TPS holder, detained, had a tooth infection, did not receive the proper health care, died within 3 months in detention. There are people at HBA that have spent years in detention. So imagine someone that's only been there for 3 months, and they were not able to make it. Outside of the, shaping the public narratives, I think it's also, the know your rights area is very important. One of the things that I've been observing myself is that we are intentionally kept in the dark. The policies are changing, the rules are changing, and there's not enough information. A lack of information does cause confusion. Confusion does cause misinformation. Misinformation does breed fear. As we've heard earlier, there is fear, there is a crisis, there is just so many different things going on. So I think taking those know your rights situation and being as open and forward as possible about, there's just some things that we do not know. There's things that we cannot promise you. There are rights that you should have, but, we can't promise that you're gonna receive them in our current political state. And another one of the bigger things is being in space with the right people. Earlier, Geraldine had the opportunity to go to Guatemala to be before the Permanent Forum of African Descent and share the stories of what's happening on the ground here. So now you have real leaders that are in the positions to make change that are hearing these stories. We met with another individual that I cannot name, but they have a pretty good position when it comes to human rights and refugee, asylee type things. And again, just being able to present those stories. We could give you the statistics, we could give you the cases and all of the things, but I think the biggest part is humanizing the individuals that we're coming across and showing that the policy changes or lack thereof literally means lives. It's the livelihood of individuals. As it was shared earlier, they can't, temporary protection status, yes, the word temporary is in there, but protection is also in there. They cannot go back to their homeland. They have nowhere to go. And then they come here and then they're persecuted in a different way because of the color of their skin, because of the country that they come from. And the goal of HBA is just trying to put that message out there so that people are aware, so that we are having the tough and difficult conversations, and then hopefully then bringing about the permanent change.
Thank you so much for your responses to that question. And as we're rounding up with this last question before we open it up to the audience, I wanted to just ask that each speaker where our goal is to get in contact with the Congressional Black Caucus and encourage them to support and defend Black immigrants. So if you had the opportunity to stand before them and speak to them, can you share a message that you would share with this congressional member on why we need their support?
The message I would share is, I think we have waited, this is a leadership opportunity for the members of the Congressional Black Caucus. When we saw the travel ban, it started with a few countries, and the expansion, and it gradually was expanding, and we did not see any leadership with that. I would really want the Congressional Caucus members to really address the travel bans, and I think we can start from that, small wins with the flow of immigration from this country predominantly impacted. It's so funny, when we were preparing the response, I thought it was a travel ban. And until we got on the call was when I realized it's actually an immigration ban, because even those in America currently are being owed to adjust their status. And that is some messaging that is not really going out there. It's beyond the travel ban. It's an immigration ban. And also, when you look at the countries who are disproportionately affected are Black majority countries. Yes. So this is your opportunity to lead these constituents and actually advance, protection for those communities. So I would really want them to respond to that.
Thank you. Yes.
What I would say is that we are one people. So either you are, born on the continent or here, we are one people, and we are bound by our history. When you read and look at our leaders from the continent that have inspired the civil rights movement here, so Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, those leaders from the continent inspired the leaders here. When you read Malcolm X, so he was largely inspired by Patrice Lumumba, and I think that is the spirit that we need to bring now. That we will not be able to reach full liberation until we work together. So whether we are here or back on the continent, our success is intertwined. So I think that's the spirit that we need to revive now, that we are one people. So just like how Malcolm X was advocating for the liberation of African countries, Congo and other countries, or how Kwame Nkrumah was advocating for the emancipation of Black people in the U.S. So that is the spirit that we need to revive now. So our message would be immigration is a Black issue. And we cannot separate immigration from all the Black issues that are affecting us as African immigrants. I mentioned that in the beginning of my remarks. It's a double jeopardy situation. We know what being Black represents, and then on top of that, then you are an African with an accent. Over the past few weeks, we have seen an increase in the number of our community members being picked up. And, the law requires, reasonable suspicion if a police officer wants to stop you. Now, in a lot of those cases, the only reasonable suspicion that those officers had was the person's accent. So now, the person's accent is African, with my accent, for example, my accent now your accent is being used as a reasonable suspicion to stop you and to potentially detain you. And that is just not right. Our message is that, I think the CBC should use this opportunity to revive that spirit that was spearheaded by leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Malcolm X. Now is the time to revive that spirit. So they should take the opportunity.
Thank you.
I feel like that's such a layered question, because given the opportunity, there's so many things that I'd like to push for, right? But the first thing is, regardless of your title or status or what position you hold, yes, law does change things, but what really makes it permanent or continuous is advocacy. So I grew up in the church, and when they used to have the whole bring a friend concept, I think when we're in these spaces, that's what we need to be doing. Bring a friend. Bring the one that you don't expect. Bring your palest friend. It really doesn't matter. Just bring a friend so that they can be in these spaces and they're educated with you and they're getting the same knowledge that you're getting. Maybe they see a different angle, but as long as the conversation exists, then we can get to the next step. So that, I think, is just pivotal to everyone, and I know there is fear that exists, particularly for those of us that don't have a secure immigration status, if you will. But I think sometimes we have to, be willing to die on our feet and not live on our knees. And the other that I would say, and to bolster that, in the opportunities that I've had when we're before or standing in front of the Supreme Court and we're doing press conferences, no one looks like me. No one sounds like you. So then I'm there, I'm by myself, I'm trying to explain all the different stories, but it's like, oh, well, this group of people might not be that greatly affected because they're not here, they're not showing up. There is power in numbers. We've heard different little quotables today, and they all go back to saying the same thing. When Gerline says, "Ampil me shai palu," that just means a lot of hands, the load is not heavy. And then you also have our emblem on our flag, L'Union fait la force. So together we have strength. There is strength in numbers, there is power in numbers. We cannot fight this fight by ourselves. So definitely bring someone along. And on the other hand, I would say something just a little bit more technical, since we are specifically talking about racial discrimination and racial biases that exist in the system as we're looking at immigration. HBA does make efforts and attempts to collect community data. So when we have your Know Your Rights events, when we have our hotlines, when we have our clients, they'll present issues. They'll tell us the things that don't seem quite right in what they're experiencing, and we document that. We chart it. We write it up, if you will, so that it's black and white. It's not, oh, well, you just feel like this is happening to you. Oh, racism isn't a real thing anymore. The conversation can get really broad. So we're documenting this, but there is not a formal racial data and immigration, if you will, with the U.S. No particular organization is doing it, and when I say organization, I'm talking government organization is doing that. So I would encourage identifying the patterns of disparity so that we can bring these issues before the courts, before Congress, and international forums. Because right now, it's great, we're building the narrative, we're painting the picture, we're getting all of the stories, we're showing how they're different, but there is statistics and data that we can actually build so we can separate a little bit of the emotion. I don't think it's fully emotional, but you have individuals that'll argue this is an emotional argument versus a logical argument. So if we could have those statistics, those data, how many, when we're talking about maritime interdiction and who's getting turned back, when we're talking about which asylum cases are getting accepted, and then we're looking at the backstories, who is actually being persecuted, who is actually in fear. You can even compare Haiti to Cuba, right? They have the 1 foot wet, dry foot, 1 foot in, 1 foot out policy, and it was fine when it was Cubans. But when it was Haitians that were dealing with similar political situations, similar strives, all of a sudden it's not okay. When you take us to the U.S. border, it started with who? Haitians. It took us all the way back to people on horses with whips. But they expanded it. They started with the black folks first, and then they reached out to everyone. And so one of the things I say is they came for one, and then they came for all. We are all in this together, so we need the statistics, and we need to bring another person with us when we're in these spaces.
Thank you so much, and that concludes the panel discussion. And we are going to open up the audience for questions, and anybody have questions, you can just feel free to stand up and ask your question.
Thank you. And, I don't know how you're going to respond to me because I came really interested to hear the panel, and I'm sorry I missed some of the things earlier, but, I'm still working. But I wanted to get here because one thing I've noticed in this country, and from everything I've heard you all say, is the void that exists in the African-American community that's here. And the problem with that is, for the first time in my lifetime, we have not one single black leader, not one. And it's never been like that since I've been alive. My hero is Malcolm X. He was killed on my birthday when I was 10 years old. It's a day I'll never forget. And so the fact that what you have now is black celebrities and spokespeople, and they get paid to talk. And so while they're not powerless, they're rudderless. And that's an issue that the black community has right now, and you're the void of linkage. How are you, from an African nation with the color of your skin, going to come to this country in this day and age and not have anybody you can reach out to because it doesn't exist now? And I agree. I have a saying, the crisis and the opportunity are always one. And so, you talk about the fear. At my age, I'm beyond that now. You just got to make a move, and you got to think outside the box. Practical and typical responses to today's solution are of no moment. They already got that covered. It's kind of like, as a spiritual person that I am now, they say faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things unseen. And I took that and added fear, the substance of things not hoped for, the evidence of things seen. And the difference is the contrast. If you hold on to what you see and not what you feel in your spirit, then the individual opinion gets lost in groupthink. And so I see a road, and I like your analysis of take someone. You got to start with one. You start at the top with the Congressional Black Caucus. There was a time when they were very effective. That time has passed. Just being frank, it just has. Nobody wants to rock the boat. And quite truthfully, nobody's willing to die for what they believe in. And so there's a whole lot of open road here for individuals who don't have the notoriety, but have the mindset and looking to unify. And I think, you know, instead of looking so high, let's also look low. And that's cool too, because, you know, you don't always have to telegraph your move. You always don't have to let people know what you know or think what you think. But that's something I've got from my understanding of Black history, the way my ancestors moved, you know, as they were being abused and tortured and enslaved. Those are the things you know about. But what about the things you don't know about? When you see the presence of you as the immigrant community and the Black people here, there's still a lot of us moving, just ain't making no noise. But the connections are real. So, you know, I thank you for the opportunity to come hear you. I got my own ideas, and I'm going to facilitate. We started talking in the office there, and I'm going to go even further. And kind of, you know, what you were saying, we had that conversation last week in the office when we first met. You know, at least, you know, you got to start somewhere. So I definitely want to associate and be involved in any way I can. And, you know, I got some thoughts, and I can make some moves. And we'll talk about it.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you so much for that comment. And I just also, and that comment speaks to the vacuum that we have in leadership. I believe it was Mother Teresa who said, if I look at the masses, I might be mobilized to do something. But if I look at one person and see what I can do for that one person, I may be able to advance something. We heard at the earlier session with our rep from Pennsylvania, a Ghanaian-born, unelected official was able to advance policy for a state that is making it all the way to Congress. You know, from the leadership of the Asian Bridge Alliance, and a Black woman went on with multiple administration. We heard from African communities together and actually winning. And I think the opportunity we have here is this. We talked about this thing called local action, and local action could be several things. For example, you would think something as simple. We call those things called sign-on letters, those advocacy letters. It's as simple like a DocuSign. Anyone ever signed a DocuSign document before? You know how easy that was? All you literally have to do is to click sign. How difficult could that be to literally click sign? And that sends a powerful message. There are organizations in the front lines who have committed their lives to this. Like, how difficult could you be to fundraise and support and organize and volunteer at this organization and do something for them? How difficult it is to show up in meetings like this, or like your neighbor did. Like, oh, I just saw this horrifying thing on the television. Is your community being impacted? We are in our current location on Capitol Hill because a foundation actually reached out to us. We used to be in Anacostia. And when there was the federal occupation, and they actually said, whoa, your community is going through help. What can we do to help? And they really help underwrite where we are today. You know, so I think this is the opportunity that this moment calls for. I think when people hear systems level impact, they don't even know where to start from, but there are little things you can do. You can donate, you can send a letter, you can volunteer, you can do a post, you can reshare, you can do something you have not done before. Even it's just to listen to people's story. You know, just be that radical generosity of storytelling, just listening to people's story and that shared humanity. I just want to center those opportunities.
Thank you.
May I also add to that very quickly? So I did want to kind of just go back to the celebrity leaders thing. So just thinking from where we are in our social media, right? People are afraid to be canceled because that's a thing now, right? I don't think Martin Luther King would have cared if we were like, you don't like what you're saying. He would still get out there and say it. But today, people mince their words and they hide behind certain platforms. So I think that is something that the youth, because they do need to be brought into this conversation, especially when their families are being torn apart by it, the youth can use that to their advantage, right? I'm just gonna throw a name out there, like Cardi B. She's Hispanic, right? There can be certain pressures that people put, but if we don't bring that +1 into these spaces for them to learn, oh, that person that's in your class, that got here in a asylee status, they might have to leave because things are changing, or they might get separated from their family because things are changing. So I think it's not the same, and that is, I mean, I guess that's the one consistency in life, right? Things change, but it's us finding out how to use those changes. And to the point of like the signups and hearing the stories and just asking the right questions, if we think about the fact that we have a case that's about to go before the Supreme Court, right? And the question is asking, what powers what is the power or limitation of that the executives hold? Can they just change things when they feel like it, based off of their personal choices? But you have district courts that we're at the Supreme Court, right? And you still have your district courts that are putting temporary stays or temporary restraining orders on some of the things that are happening. That's two different things. That's answering two questions, right? What can executive power do, but how much power do the individual district courts have? That's gonna be where community comes into play, as you shared. That's gonna be where you stand up in your respective city, town, neighborhoods, and you advocate, and you speak, and you ask the questions in hopes that the district courts can at least hold that power that they have. So I just really wanted to go back and acknowledge that, like, yes, things are very much different, and I do think there are some challenges due to desensitization as it comes to social media, but there are ways that we can use that to our advantage to, like, push the individuals that may not have that same educational backing, because that's one of the big issues. Education is being stripped away from just about everybody. So for those that don't have that educational backing, we can just present it in a new reel of 5-10 seconds kind of way just to get that message out there. But where there's a will, there is a way, and I believe we can find it.
Yes, sir.
We focus a lot on the federal government listening to our needs. But we also have to start paying attention to our state, county, and local governments. Now, here in the state of Michigan, we work with our state, county, and local officials on immigration. We work on it not just at a social justice level, but also as a business economic level of immigration. We've been very successful. Senate Bill 267, you can look it up. Michigan State Senate Bill 267 discusses the development of an African Caribbean Trade Commission in the state of Michigan. That was led by GABA. We went to Lansing, we talked to our state senators. We were able to pass that bill on a bipartisan support of 28-7 vote. It's sitting in the Michigan House of Representatives, but where I'm going with that is conversations doesn't always have to start at the federal level. It doesn't always have to start at the Congressional Black Caucus. It can start with your state delegate, your state representative. It can start with your city council person by talking about an ordinance being changed on our behalf. Because your power is not just the federal, it's all levels of government. You understand? Because when you get to the CBC level, and when you get to those type of level, now you got to start talking about money. So you heard of this group AIPAC, of how they have influence on the Congressional Black Caucus currently, right? You have all these other type of lobbying groups. We could do the same thing, but there are other levels of influence that we've been talking about in this room that we could do at a state level, a county level, and a local levels of government. And guess what? We'll be more impactful. Now here's where I'm going with this, and I'll sit down. Dearborn, Michigan, you know about Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn, Michigan, largest Middle Eastern population in the United States outside the Middle East, right? I live next door in Inkster, Michigan, right? And Dearborn Heights, another large Middle Eastern population, and the city of Hamtramck, which is split between Yemeni and Bangladeshi, those three cities were running a campaign during 2024 presidential election called Uncommitted, and they were able to consolidate their vote to stop Michigan from turning blue and giving it back to Donald Trump on one geopolitical issue, which was Gaza. So they held us hostage But the Arab community came together with their dollars, putting their issues front and center from a geopolitical standpoint. What the three of you and all of us have been talking about today is a geopolitical issue. Immigration is a geopolitical issue. If you're talking from Haiti, it's geopolitical. If it's Nigeria, it's geopolitical. It doesn't matter. From any part of diaspora, it's geopolitical. So the question becomes strategically and methodically, how do we start talking to representatives that represent us from a geopolitical perspective on immigration to get them to understand that we too are players and not just sitting begging for crumbs that fall from the table? Thank you.
Do we have any questions before we round up with the call to action? Yes, ma'am.
If we can, thank you so much. First off, I want to thank you for putting this together, and the responses from the panelists, I appreciate them all. But is there anything that could be done on adoption? If you look at Asian countries, Hispanic, those communities, when they go for adoption, they have their children come easily. But for Nigerian community, it's a big problem in our community for so many families that put in for adoption. It's like it's been on hold forever, some 10 years. I don't know if there's anything this organization or walls that could be put across to find out why adoption process for Nigerian families, Nigerian communities remain on hold. And this is devastating for the community. Another thing I would like to see addressed is the visa issues. Again, for Nigerian communities, it has been on hold for a long time. I don't know if there's a permanent ban right now, but it's not just going forward at all, despite the contributions of Nigerian community in the United States. From economy to education to different platforms, we are very visible. We are making important contributions, yet visa process for Nigerians is just so sad. So these are some of the concerns the community have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will respond. So thank you, ma'am, for the question. Thank you, Mr. Kindele, for the contribution. Ma'am, I think you're speaking, the overarching theme is policy advocacy. And you're touching on the family-based immigration pathway. And I'm going to turn it to my colleagues to also speak specifically on adoption, but I just want to frame it from a system policy change standpoint, that as those of us sitting in this audience and those who are listening to me, we don't always have to wait till an issue becomes a pain point before we turn to platforms like this for them to do something about this. If you live in this country, you can go to a website called Google, and you can type, who is my representative? And you can type your zip code, and you can pick up your wonderful iPhone or Android, and you can make a telephone call. They are obligated to record your conversation, especially if you come from that district. The staffers are obligated to share your concerns with your representative. It is your right to schedule a meeting to talk about those types of concerns. When those calls become now amplified, it turns into a critical mass and it moves policy forward. But we don't always have to wait to when things reach that particular level. I thought it's important that I state that. There are several nonprofit organizations like those in this room who have advocacy issues. You can call them and also try to reach out to them and volunteer and see how those issues could get across to them. But you all have, as it was stated by Mr. Kindele, from congressional level to your county, you can actually do something about them. The power is not on this platform, it's with every single one of us. And that is the privilege and the empowerment we have to live in this USA. I don't know if anyone want to add anything to that.
You know, we should be raising those issues with our elected officials. Why is it easier to adopt from Germany than Nigeria or Congo or Ghana. One thing, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to highlight one important issue that we are seeing with specific or individual applications and petitions, especially asylum applications. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard about this new policy. There are a lot of policies now, but there is a policy called pretermission of asylum cases. So under that policy, an immigration judge can deny someone's the ability to present their case in court if that person is subject to an agreement that the U.S. government has signed with Uganda. Now, last year, in September 2025, the U.S. signed an agreement with Uganda, basically saying that they will accept any asylum seekers from asylum seekers in the U.S., they will accept them in Uganda. So now, the administration has been using that agreement, bilateral agreement between Uganda and the U.S. government to now pretermit or cancel asylum cases, before people could have the opportunity to present the case in court. And we're seeing a lot of our community members falling victims of that policy, people being denied the sacred rights of presenting of a hearing, presenting their case. I think as we think about immigration, how policies are being enacted here in the U.S., we should also keep in mind that there are factors, leaders on the continent that are empowering, fueling those policies, right? So, I don't know if we have any representative here from the African Union, but, this is an issue that we have brought up to certain institutions, African institutions here in Washington. We don't know how many other countries, African countries, tend to sign those agreements with the U.S. government, but it's something that we need to pay attention to, something that we need to track, to monitor, because those agreements will be very, very detrimental, very harmful to our brothers and sisters that are seeking asylum. So essentially what the U.S. government is telling them, hey, we can't even hear your asylum case. We can't even open your asylum case. As long as you are from Nigeria, then you can go to Uganda. If you're from Ghana, then you can go to Uganda and seek your asylum case there, your asylum status there. And also, what makes this policy dangerous is, the conditions on the ground. We've had, and this is something we've presented to court, where, you have Ugandan government officials that are saying, hey, we don't have the infrastructure. Well, we understand the government has signed this agreement, but the country does not have the infrastructure, the resources to handle asylum seekers from the U.S. But this is something that, a lot of the judges are turning a blind eye to, and, this could be very, very devastating to our communities. So what I would say, in our advocacy work, as we are monitoring policies, tracking policies here in the U.S., also let's pay attention to how our own African nations are contributing to some of the policies that we are seeing here devastating our communities.
I don't know if there will be, I don't know if there will be a final minute round, but I just want to use the opportunity to just quickly get this in. So I just want to end my remarks with a story, and the larger theme of this is, I think we need to help to get the word out to our community. We don't always have to wait till crisis mode before we speak up. So these are three organizations representing the entire Black immigrant communities. A Nigerian would not go to Asian Bridge Alliance and they would turn them away. And a Congolese would not come to Nigerian Center, would turn them away. We are all here for the community. And we all have the opportunity as community leaders, because I know you are all center of influence to various larger community beyond seated in this hall, to let our community know that help is here. All they have to do is pick up the telephone and reach out to us. And we are here to help. I remember doing an intake a few years ago. This family was referred to us by the DC Mayor's Office of African Affairs. And the family came, a family of about 3 or 4, they came from Mozambique. And I think they were living some humanitarian situations. They have decided that we're going to seek asylum in the United States or something like that. So when they came, I asked the woman leading the children and the rest of the family, when did you come to the United States? She said 3 days ago. I said, whoa, 3 days ago? How did you hear about the Nigerian Center? She said, I didn't know that. I actually researched resources and I found the Mayor's Office of African Affairs, and they told us about you. That very day, we began the process for asylum application. That very day, we do micro-lending. We began the process for her to open a credit line for a credit card. That very day, we gave our services for DMV to have a DMV driver's license, and she got a micro-loan to even start a business all in 1 week. We are able to help at the very early stages of cases before they get complicated. That is a topic I'm trying to speak to here. But oftentimes when people come to us and call the phone, things are extremely bad at that particular point. And lastly, one of the reasons why the work that we do, it's extremely important beyond the direct legal services, organization like ours has a policy component that we can provide extensive country report condition to support you that you may not typically get from other sources as well. We are able to mobilize the community to provide a community impact report, your value to our community. We can advocate and legal services, and if necessary, we can even crowdfund for such cases that, so we all have the opportunity to elevate organizations here. It might not necessarily be for you. One standard question we ask people at Nigerian Center is, when could you have used a Nigerian Center? Whether it's you or someone that you know. Those people right now, please let them know they can reach out to organizations like particularly Black immigrants to get help. I just wanted to put that plug in, so thank you for that.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And that concludes our panel discussion. Benga said it all, honestly. The takeaway is spread the word about the work that we're doing. As Akindele said, you can start from the local level within your state. Organizing, reach out to your representatives. The Nigerian Center, actually on our YouTube page, we have a lot of resources, and I'm sure Haitian Bridge Alliance does, as well as African Communities Together has a lot of resources on our page, Community to Capital. We literally break down how you can reach out to your representatives. Even last year, one of our panelists that works with African Communities Together talked about how reaching out to a representative, she was able to get a letter written, I think, for a scholarship for a college. And so you can do the work. You don't have to wait till something is huge and out of control before we now try to gather and advocate. And so I really hope that that was a valuable takeaway for all our community members. Yes, sir.
Kechi, I'm so sorry. I wanted to close with this story in only 2 minutes. So in 2019, our organization, African Communities Together, we were talking to the Liberian communities. It was the same type of conversation. Well, you need to reach out to your members of Congress to advocate for policies that will benefit you. And here's what the Liberian community did. They came together and they were able to call this senator from Rhode Island, Jack Reed. And in 2019, this senator received so many calls, just like Mbenga was saying, that they are obligated to take those calls to record and to act upon them. And this senator was able to introduce a law, the ALRIF, the Liberian Refugee Fairness Act, that granted permanent status, green card, to over 10,000 Liberian people, Liberian individuals. So as a result of that effort, over 10,000 Liberian individuals in the US were able to get green card. And that happened during the first Trump administration. So advocacy works. I know, especially at this time, we're feeling despair, uncertainty, fear, but advocacy works. It has worked in the past. We have tangible, proven examples, and we believe it can work now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kechi, quick one. I just want to add a quick one here. And also in our giving as well, it's important that we support the smaller organizations, as it were, not just reaching out to the very big organizations in terms of giving little monthly contributions that we can give to support the work that they're all doing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. That's very, very important. Thank you.